Got Jackie Franchuli on the line from Gators territory, breaking down Florida football for us. Let's move on to the defensive line position. Always a strength at Florida, but you've got a number of NFL-ready guys moving on that we see at the Combine this week in Indianapolis. So who do we lose and who's coming back?
Well, obviously, the two guys in the NFL Combine, big losses with John Grenard and Jabari Zuniga, two really good pass rushers. We saw what happened when Florida did not have them on the field against LSU. They were very, very much missed, specifically John Grenard, who did, in just one season was the voice of that defense. He really became that alpha dog that Dan Mullen really wanted. So he's going to be a huge miss, not just on the field, but off the field. That's a big presence and big hole that Dan Mullen needs to fill. But another guy that they're going to miss is Adam Schuler. He was a very solid defensive tackle, and him and Kyrie Campbell really worked well together inside of the defensive line. So now you're going to look at Daryl Slayton and Elijah Conleaf. You're looking at those two guys to really step up their game. Elijah Conleaf had a season-ending injury last year. Slayton started playing a little bit better towards the end of the year, and actually there were some rumblings that he might have even considered going to the NFL draft early because of some people looking at the film towards the end of the game. Obviously, he's staying at Florida, but he's a guy that really needs to continue on that trajectory. Him and Conleaf had a problem for the first few years that they were at Florida, that they were great practice players, but for some reason couldn't translate what they did at practice onto game day. Now, it looks like something kind of sparked into Slayton, that he's kind of turned a corner when it comes to that. And actually, I think Kyrie Campbell has had a huge impact on Slayton. I'm actually doing a story on Kyrie Campbell and how nutrition at Florida has really helped him along the way, and how he's really leaned on the nutrition staff and Nick Savage in the strength conditioning room to really help get his body ready a little bit for the season. We saw how his body was a little bit better than that last season and what his aim this year is to do. So when I was talking to Campbell about that, he brought up that Daryl Slayton kind of bought into that same thing. So he was able to lose weight, was able to become quicker and not as gassed when he's playing a game. So maybe there's a slight little mental click that went with Slayton, and that's something that Florida really hoped that happened, because you're looking at the interior defensive line and they really need a solid unit. Kyrie Campbell, I think, will be a guy that we look at and maybe as being the next John Grenard as far as being a leader. He's got the big personality for it. He's obviously got respect from a few of the players already. As I just said, Slayton listened to him, and, they see his off the field work and work ethic. We're talking about nutrition and strength and conditioning. So that's, maybe he can step in that role. But as far as, replacing Grenard and Zuniga, I think Florida is in a good spot. Don't forget Brenton Cox. He's a former 5-star recruit. He was a transfer from Georgia, wasn't eligible last season because of the transfer, so he had to sit out. Well, he's available now. So I would expect him and Jeremiah Moon to kind of battle it out for buck. And I can even see Jeremiah Moon kind of switching positions a little bit through that DL because he's such a versatile player, and that's what they did last year with him. But yeah, I expect Brenton Cox to be at buck. And then obviously Zach Carter, could be easily slot for Zuniga because that's what he did last year. Don't forget, Zuniga missed most of last year with that ankle injury. He really only played towards the end of the season. And he played on third downs against Georgia. So I think, when you look at the talent that they have Zach Carter, they have Brenton Cox, they have Jeremiah Moon. And then you got the young guys like Chris Bogle, and you've got Mahmoud Diabate. I think they're fine in that position as far as talent. Now it's just getting those younger guys more experience. Great job by Todd Grantham last year to make sure that Diabate did get all that experience. He had that incredible game. I believe it was against South Carolina last year or against Vandy. I think it was against Vandy, actually. So they have been able to get those young guys there, but they want to continue to develop those players, and they want to continue building their experience. But at least they have guys like Zach Carter, Brenton Cox, and Jeremiah Moon there to help with that pass rush. The biggest question is who's going to be that vocal leader that's going to step up. I have a feeling Kyrie Campbell is going to be the one guy that we might see become that alpha dog. But again, that's something that it needs to be processed, and it needs to be someone that kind of grabs the defense, and it takes a little bit of a while. I know Kyrie Campbell last media day told me, he was a reluctant leader last year. He was a guy that didn't think he was going to be that vocal leader. And then suddenly he said, I realized I needed to become that leader. I needed to really help these young guys up. I needed to be that guy to tell them and critique them and help them along. So he had that aha moment last offseason, and he learned from John Grenard this past year. So maybe that he will have another epiphany during this offseason and see if he can become the alpha dog that Dan Mullen, Todd Grantham want this next year.
Slayton and Carter with pretty substantial contributions in not limited time, but didn't play all the time. 57 tackles between the two of them, 7.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Obviously, Grenard was, as you say, the alpha dog, 16 tackles for loss and 10 sacks. And Zuniga's numbers would have been something in that range had he been on the field. So a big void to fill there between those two guys that we'll see again in Indianapolis throughout the week. Jackie Franchuli on the line from Gators territory, breaking down Florida football as we head towards spring camp and all the big battles for starting positions. Jackie, we appreciate you stopping by.
Oh, thanks for having me.